What separates a company that lasts 100 years from one that flames out in 10? What do Boeing and Walt Disney and Nordstrom have in common that their failed competitors didn't? Two researchers spent 6 years answering that question, and what they found appended almost everything business leaders thought they knew about building great companies. Today we're breaking down Built to Last by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras, the landmark study of truly exceptional, enduring companies. It's the predecessor to Good to Great, and in some ways more important. The ideas in this book have shaped how an entire generation of business leaders thinks about vision, culture, and long-term success. Let's get into it. Takeaway 1. The book's central metaphor is one of the most powerful in all of business literature: clock building versus time telling. A time teller is a brilliant leader who has all the answers. They make great decisions, inspire the troops, and the company thrives as long as they are there. But when they leave, the answers leave with them. The company loses its compass. A clock builder creates a system, a culture, a set of processes, a self-perpetuating organism that produces great decisions, great people, and great outcomes without requiring the founder's genius. The clock keeps ticking after the builder is gone. Walt Disney, the person, was a time teller. But Walt Disney, the company, became a clock, a system for generating creativity, storytelling, and quality that has continued for decades after his death. His greatest achievement wasn't the movies. It was building something that could keep making movies without him. The question for any leader: are you building a clock or telling the time? Takeaway 2. Collins and Porras discovered something that completely surprised them. Visionary companies are almost never started with a great idea. The conventional story is: entrepreneur has brilliant idea, starts company around it, company takes off. The reality of enduring companies is usually the opposite. 3M started as a failed mining company before discovering adhesives. HP started with Hewlett and Packard in a garage with no specific product idea. They just knew they wanted to work together on something. Marriott started as a root beer stand. The visionary companies succeeded not because they had better initial ideas, but because they were better at trying things, learning from what worked, and building on it. They were committed to the company as an entity, not to any particular product or strategy. The implication: stop waiting for the perfect idea. Start building. The idea will emerge from the process. Takeaway 3. Big, hairy, audacious goals is one of the most famous concepts from the book. Visionary companies set goals so large and so far out that they seem almost impossible. Not stretch goals, moonshots. Boeing in the 1950s committed to building a commercial jet aircraft even though it had no experience in commercial aviation and no customers. Ford committed to making cars affordable for ordinary Americans when only the rich could afford them. NASA committed to putting a man on the moon within a decade when they'd barely gotten a man off the ground. Bag work for a specific psychological reason. They're too big to fake. With a normal goal, you can achieve it through incremental effort and declare victory. A bag requires fundamental change, genuine innovation, and sustained commitment. It forces the organization to become something it isn't yet. What's the bag in your business or life that you've been too afraid to articulate? Takeaway 4. One of the book's most counterintuitive findings: visionary companies are not more tolerant of experimentation than their competitors. They are more disciplined. They experiment constantly, but within a very strict ideological framework. Collins and Porras call this try a lot of stuff and keep what works. But the keep what works is filtered through the company's core values. 3M didn't just keep any innovation that was commercially successful. They kept innovations that were consistent with their culture of creative people solving problems. This is the difference between disciplined experimentation and just doing whatever makes money. Companies that do anything profitable tend to drift into incoherence. Companies that do profitable things consistent with their values build compounding advantage. What are the filters through which you evaluate new opportunities? Not just is this profitable, but is this us? Takeaway 5. The most important concept in the book, and the one most often misunderstood: preserve the core, stimulate progress. These are not opposites. The most enduring companies do both simultaneously, and doing both is what makes them endure. The core is the company's fundamental values and purpose, the things that never change regardless of external pressure. Johnson & Johnson's credo places patience before shareholders. That hasn't changed in 80 years, through every market shift and crisis. Progress is everything else: strategy, products, processes, structure, culture, and execution. These must change constantly as the environment changes. A company that tries to preserve everything, including its strategy, will die. A company that changes everything, including its values, will lose its identity. What are the things in your organization that should never change? And what are the things that should change every year? Takeaway 6. Collins and Porras find that visionary companies are almost fanatically focused on their core ideology, to a degree that makes outsiders uncomfortable. This is often misread as rigidity or cult-like behavior, but it's actually a competitive advantage. When a company is absolutely clear about what it stands for, hiring becomes easier. You know exactly who fits and who doesn't. Strategy becomes clearer. You know which opportunities are right for you and which aren't. Culture becomes self-reinforcing. People who don't share the values leave on their own. Nordstrom is famous for its service culture. New employees receive a card that says the Nordstrom rule is to use good judgment in all situations. That's the entire employee manual. It works because they hire people with the right values and trust them. If you had to write your organization's entire rule book in one sentence, what would it say? Takeaway 7. The book has a fascinating finding about profitability. Visionary companies are not primarily motivated by profit. That seems crazy given that they are some of the most profitable companies in history. But profit is not the purpose, it's the result. The visionary companies pursued something beyond profit: a mission, a standard, a belief in what they were building. And because they pursued it obsessively, the profit followed. Companies that pursue profit above all else tend to make short-term decisions that undermine long-term value. This isn't idealism, it's mechanism. When you optimize for profit above all, you cut R&D when times are tough, you compromise on quality when it costs more, you exit long-term investments when short-term returns are better. Visionary companies don't do these things because profit isn't the point. Takeaway 8. One of the study's most important findings is about homegrown management. Visionary companies almost never bring in outside CEOs to save them. In 18 companies over nearly 200 years, they found only 4 external CEO appointments, and they mostly failed or underperformed internally developed leaders. Why? Because an organization's culture, its core ideology, its clock-building mechanism, these things require deep understanding that can't be acquired from the outside in a few months. The leader who has lived inside the organization, been shaped by its values, and understands its mechanisms at a cellular level is almost always more effective than the brilliant outsider. This has implications for succession planning. The most important management job isn't leading the organization today. It's developing the people who will lead it tomorrow. Takeaway 9. Collins and Porras coined a phrase that became one of the most quoted in business: good is the enemy of great. If something is good enough, there's no urgency to make it great. Visionary companies reject good enough as a standard. They describe this as never being satisfied, not in an anxious, neurotic way, but in an aspirational way. No matter how well things are going, there's always a higher standard to reach for. The Toyota production system is famous for this. Every employee at every level is expected to identify waste and improve the system, constantly, forever. This creates a kind of productive restlessness. There's always a gap between where you are and where you could be. The visionary company treats that gap not as failure, but as invitation. Takeaway 10. The book ends with what Collins and Porras call building the vision, a practical framework for articulating what you're trying to build. It has 2 parts: core ideology, who you are and what you stand for, which never changes, and envisioned future, what you're trying to achieve, which is a bag plus a vivid description of what life will be like when you get there. The vivid description part is underappreciated. It's not enough to say we want to be the best. You have to paint a specific picture. What does it look, feel, and sound like when you've achieved the bag? Great leaders are great storytellers of an imagined future. Martin Luther King didn't say, "I have a strategic plan." He said, "I have a dream." And then he described it in such specific, vivid detail that his audience could see it. What's your vivid description of the future you're trying to build? Subscribe for weekly breakdowns of books that change how you work and lead.